Hello, everyone. Welcome to this week's episode of To The Point podcast. I'm Rachel Lyon, here with my co-host, Vince Spina. Vince, hello.
Morning, Rach. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you? I know this is going to go live way after Halloween, but did you do anything fun for Halloween?
No, I got to tell you, I'm disappointed. So for the listeners, I moved from the Bay Area, now I'm in Arizona. In the Bay Area, we would get, and this is without exaggeration, 12, 13, 1,400 trick-or-treaters in about a 3 to 4 hour span. I mean, they just kept coming in droves and droves. Here, I got exactly no trick-or-treaters. And we purchased quite a bit of candy thinking, you know, it wouldn't be as popular where we're at now as it was in our last residence, but literally zero. And my wife's like, you better get rid of that candy. Like, we didn't have one, not one. And so it was a little bit disappointing, to be honest.
Well, were the lights off at your house, or
They
was
were
it
not.
an inviting? Okay.
Yeah, no. It's a newer neighborhood, and there's space between houses. So I think in the, the 6-year-old efficiency model, they're like, yeah, it's not worth going down that cul-de-sac where there's two homes, a good distance apart from each other. We're going to stay where it's a little more dense in houses. So
That makes
I
sense.
think it was an
Critical mass.
Efficiency thing. Yeah.
Yes, exactly.
They did a motion and time study. I'm trying to impress Marios here, but I think these 6-year-olds are industrial engineers. They were doing some motion and time and said, yeah, we're going to stay away from that street and just keep moving on.
That's right. Time is candy. Time is candy.
Time is candy.
Absolutely.
Oh my God, that might stick. That one might stick.
Well, I'm so excited for today's guest. Everyone, please welcome Professor Marios Savvides. He holds the Bossa Nova Robotics Professorship of AI at Carnegie Mellon University. He's also the founder and director of the Biometric Center and a full tenure professor in electrical and computer engineering. And if that's not enough, he also, in 2022, was named Inventor of the Year by the Pittsburgh Intellectual Property Association for his contributions to the advancement of AI and biometric technologies. Wow. Marios, welcome.
Wow.
Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Vince. It's an honor to be on your podcast, and I just thank you for the opportunity. It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you.
This is going to be a fun conversation. Vince, do you want to kick off the first
Yeah,
question?
I'll kick it off, and it is going to be fun. And I'll tell you, Marios, we try to keep it to about 45 minutes. This one could go for 45 hours, I think. I mean, the kind of the topics that we want to kind of dig in. This is real time today.
Yes.
People care about it both in their personal lives, their professional lives. So, if you don't mind, let's start with facial detection.
Yes.
And Rachel and I, our company, and a lot of our listeners are in the world of cybersecurity. So, first question maybe for you is, from a facial detection perspective, what role do you think that technology plays in enhancing our listeners' cybersecurity solutions? And particularly, some of the technologies we care about are things like authentication, access control, et cetera. So what's your thoughts on that?
That's a great question, Vince. In facial recognition, if we think about the whole workflow, the first thing an AI system does is detect faces. So it has to do facial detection. And so when you think of it from a security point of view, that is the weakest link. If I can't detect a face, I'm not even trying to authenticate or recognize someone. So many times, adversarial attacks will try to actually, fool detection systems so that someone goes completely undetected. And it's been a big problem. And pre-COVID, most of the commercial technologies would not even detect faces that were just masked. Somebody was wearing a mask, even a COVID mask, it would not find a face. We worked on that problem almost 10 years ago, and we saw that way before COVID. But if you think about faces, you got to find a face. It could be partial face. It could be a face behind a face. Right? Somebody's just wearing a hood. Someone's wearing a cap, baseball cap. It's really lower down. So detecting faces has to be extremely robust, because the moment you fool that, you're invisible to the system.
Marios, I'm going to keep going around. I just want to pull that thread because that's interesting. Like, can you define what makes a face? Like, where does it start? Where does it stop? And I'm thinking even just like on my iPhone and that, my iPhone is letting me in now,
Right.
even where I wear glasses or sometimes sunglasses or things like that. And I'm like, well, how did it learn that the face is still there, but I'm covering up the eyes or something? So what is a face today? I guess is the question.
Right.
Like,
That's a great question because a face in the old days was you had to have two eyes, a nose, and a mouth. And if some part of that wasn't there, you couldn't find a face. I mean, now a face is, like I said, anything, right? Your eyes could be blocked because you're wearing sunglasses. Does that mean there's no face? You have no eyes, right? The system doesn't find eyes. It still has to find a face. So the mouth is there, the nose is there. Even if there's just one eye, that's still part of a face. You still have to authenticate or you have to recognize. So the good thing is AI systems have gotten stronger. We've built a lot of technologies to make it, we can find a face even if you literally just this part of the eye is just visible. And it's important because you and I, if the big gap has been, can we develop AI systems that can detect a face where as good as humans, right? Because even if you see somebody picking through and you just see one eye, oh, someone's over there. I see an eye, or I see an ear, I see part of a face. Most of the AI before, I would say, 5 years ago was not there. Now it's there. We can find a face as good as people do. So, and it's very important. And again, it doesn't mean you will recognize it always, right? If I just see one eye or I just see part of an ear, doesn't mean I can recognize who it is. Although there's technology that you can use do some ear recognition, or we've done some periocular work. But at least there's a face and you start looking, okay, well, I can track. Well, okay, now I see a partial view. When am I going to see more of you, and then I can recognize it, right? So when do I cue in the recognizer? Let me extract the face. Or, you know what? I'm not going to trust the recognition because I only see 5% of a face. So I'm not going to trust what it tells me because there's just no information. So knowing how much of the face is there, knowing if it's occluded, if it's masked, if someone is painted, if knowing those extra attributes are important key features to go into the recognizer so that it gives a more informed decision. Just like you and I looking at someone, or I see an eye, you know what, that looks like Marius, I'm not sure. And the more you see, oh, that is Marius. We have to make the AI systems mimic that human thought process. Oh, I have more information. Oh, and now I'm sure that is. How to accumulate that data? So AI systems are getting smarter so that we're using that extra information to come up with something equivalent to how we would actually recognize someone.
Yeah, it's amazing how far it's come. And one of the things that you kind of keep hearing and kind of in discussion too about whole the facial recognition is what are privacy and security concerns, right, with the use of facial detection technology, particularly in public or semi-public spaces. I think of the airport now, instead of I think checking your boarding ticket or whatever, they verify you with your face. You look into the little recognizer, and then it either recognizes you or it doesn't. But I just thought that was fascinating. When did that get set up, and how did it get my face? So I'd be interested in your perspective here on that conversation.
Yeah, so airports are a different scenario, right? I mean, it's a public space. It's more of for security. You have you're going through a system that uses facial recognition, right?
Right.
I think to me what is more interesting is what happens in outside public spaces,
Right.
when there is public spaces. There's no notion of privacy, right? At
Right.
least expected. But if you're somewhere else under a commercial, how is your information being used, right? Is there consent, right? And when I think about those things, lately I've been seeing a lot of things going on, particularly in the state of Illinois, with, if you think about the BIPA Act, the Biometrics Information Privacy Act, right? Illinois is one of the states that really has gone very far to make sure to protect the biometric privacy of individuals, and what information is being collected, stored, and it has given the right to users to sue companies that are collecting biometrics without their consent. And it's very interesting. and I think that's also a place where the law may have gone the other direction. I think it has become very gun-ho, where a lot of users are trying to sue anything that they may be using biometric or maybe using a face, even though they're not really doing facial recognition, but they're doing something completely different. So, with everything, there's a saying in Greek, pan metron ariston, which means do everything with moderation, right? A law is there to protect, and it's make sure that nothing is abused, but at the same side, it should not be abused by the users as well. But it's very interesting how I see all these things evolve, and yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, Morris,
Absolutely.
I think I probably won't ask you, to me, there's a whole conversation around the ethical considerations when it comes to, this type of technology. Probably stay away from that, but what about on the bias side when it comes to things like gender, ethnicity, things like that? How does that all play into facial detection? Is there...
Vince, great question, right? I mean, and that's where, unfortunately, biometric technology has taken a lot of heat, right? There was a study with MIT and Microsoft, I think it was called the Gender Shades Project, right? Where they basically examined 3 facial recognition systems from IBM, Microsoft, and Face++. And what it showed was that it recognized males better than females, and the performance gap was anywhere from 8% to 20% difference, right? They even did analysis on just the folks, lighter skinned subjects versus darkened skinned, and it showed that the performance gap between those systems ranged between 11% to almost 19%.
Wow.
So, and those are just those systems, right? I'm not saying now, and even when we train systems, we make sure things are that the bias is eliminated. But the way you try to eliminate bias is that 2 ways. You have to make sure that when you train an AI system or a facial recognition system, you have an equal distribution of your data. Meaning, if you, for any reason, you have more subjects from one particular ethnic group than another, an AI algorithm will naturally tend to work better for what it's seen more of, right? And it may not care. So if I have, 10% error, it could be that, there's a lot more error in that bias. So you have to make sure the accuracy is not just an overall accuracy, but rather it is an accuracy that I'm striving to get 99% accuracy, and it has to be 99% on all ethnic groups and gender groups, right? So that when I'm quoting accuracy, I've specifically made sure my algorithm is not biased, right? So it was kind of a wake-up call. It's like, okay, whoa, yeah, one number is not good enough. I have to make sure that my system, anyone's system, is equally working well for all gender, age, ethnic groups, right? And I think it was a very good, and NIST did a similar study as well and showed that. So it was a wake-up call for researchers and commercial entities to pay attention to those things. And there was also that whole Google algorithm that was detecting really strange kind of faces, right? And that wasn't good. Now, yeah, it's important, and sometimes people will discover something as oh, look at this, and things are blown out of proportion. The reality is it does make an error, and should minimize and look at and fix those errors. It's very important. So reducing bias is now an ethical responsibility of AI scientists, right? It has to be.
Yeah.
And when you talk about ethics, it's also interesting when you think about, that's facial recognition. Think about now a car, autonomous car. It's driving in the middle of the road. It may not be able to stop, and maybe it has to make a turn. I'm just making this up.
Sure.
Okay, and there's 2 people, there's an elderly gentleman, a grandfather and a young kid. Unfortunately,
Marios is about to go Sophie's Choice on us, I think.
Oh yeah, yeah. This is the kind of things we have to think about edge cases, right? And it's very important that, AI systems, what do you do? What do you do? What does an AI system in all these edge cases? And someone's making a decision somewhere. Do you save the person in the car, or do you save the
Yeah.
person not in the car? Because at the end of the day, you may have to hit something, and that may, kill the person in the car,
Yeah.
or the whoever jumped in the middle of the road. It's not a, I
Yeah.
don't know. What do you do?
Yeah, that is a big dilemma.
Yep.
And, um,
Which is why you need a lot of good, not only AI, but sensors to be able to
right.
detect pedestrians and see if someone
Hmm.
is on a trajectory to jump in front or do something, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, it's a
that
tough
increases
one. I mean,
cost
I
of
will say,
systems.
Yep.
just sidebar, Marius. When I lived in New York City, driving through certain areas and the Bronx or whatever, it would be dark and people would be in between cars. You wouldn't see them, and they would just come out of nowhere. And if you're not driving really slow, it's a problem. And those are kind of real world challenges, right? With any kind of autonomous vehicle. I think the sensors are critical, but how fast can they respond? Unless you're always going
Right.
10 miles an hour.
Right. I'll tell you, I live up north in here in Pittsburgh, and we get a lot of deer. So I installed a thermal
Oh,
camera.
yeah.
It's like a deer alert. But it's not like just a deer alert, it also sees anything that's, has a high heat signature. So and Rachel, like you said, I go to New York sometimes, and at night or people will jump in and you don't see them because it's just no. Sometimes you're in a neighborhood or area, it's very dark. But
Yes.
that system actually has helped me detect when there's a pedestrian
Wow.
where I wouldn't see, wow, there's somebody there. I can't see because maybe they're just, wearing very dark clothes anyway, and it's not very
Hmm.
well lit in that area. So this is where, AI and good sensors can actually help. So if done
Yeah.
right, I think actually can assist because that's assisted me. Where ordinarily I wouldn't even have seen that there's a person about walking. Like, whoa, where did this guy come from? Like, oh, I saw them in my thermal camera because it was this bright heat map of I don't know, of a thermal object.
Wow. I didn't even know you could get such a thing for the car.
You can. It's the night vision.
Interesting.
The cars have night vision.
Okay.
Some cars and you can retrofit.
Oh, wow. Okay. I like that. I need to get on that. That's genius. Um, so we can't have a conversation about facial detection and recognition without bringing in the AI element, right? That everybody talks about. And with AI kind of growing and evolving and doing all the things, there have been conversations as well, right, on the ability to replicate a voice or replicate a face in AI. And so, how can facial detection systems differentiate? How can they know what's real and what's not real if someone were trying to, kind of use my face to get into a certain system, thinking that I have, privileged access or something like that?
That's a great point, Rachel. So I think you're touching upon 2 points. One is the real world authentication aspect. Can somebody do a Tom Cruise Mission Impossible face
Right.
spoof, right, to get access to a system? And the way people do that, or at least detect spoof attacks, is, well, there's two things. What's the what how can someone attack? Someone will attack by maybe having a printout, a picture of a person, right?
Hmm.
And that looks exactly the same. But then you start looking at, okay, well, is this a picture? Meaning, is this a flat surface
Right.
versus a 3D face, right? So if you're using something like one of those Intel RealSense cameras or any camera that can detect depth, right, or 3D stereo, then you can see, well, okay, I have a 3D object. This is not somebody displaying an iPad with someone's face.
Mm.
This is something that actually is a 3D. Then the question is somebody wearing a mask or not that looks at someone? And then the question is, can you detect the pulse? A mask won't have that pulse signature. So um, basically, cameras are sensitive enough that can detect something we can't see. So blood is flowing through our whole body and it's flowing through our head. And you can actually detect very weakly in in the camera, the color fluctuates very minutely, and you can actually start extracting a heart rate just
Hmm.
by looking at the camera and the person's face. And so if you employ some of those methods, then you can detect, well, okay, is this somebody wearing a mask, or is that a real person with blood flowing through their head? So that's how you can sort of solve the presentation attacks to an actual physical access system. Now, I think another question you were alluding to is, well, in the digital world now we have deep fakes. Is this social media? Is this viral video of whoever we're seeing? Is that person, or is that a deep fake of the person?
Right.
Right? So misinformation,
Hmm.
and that gets tricky because you need temporal information, right? Deep fakes are going so good that from just a single image you can't tell if it's a deep fake or not.
Right.
And one of the giveaways that most deep fakes can be detected is the eye movement. If you look at a spoof, and there's many of these, people acted become Tom Cruise or whatnot, and they look amazingly realistic, right? And I can send you some
Yes.
videos. I teach in class and I show them, like students are like, wow, looks like him, and even the voice sounds like him too.
Yes.
But
Yes.
the eyes, if you look closely at the eyes, there's there's gaps. The eye movement is not natural. Where they're looking at
Interesting.
is not natural. Sometimes it looks like they're looking at their eyes are not converging on real objects. That
Ah.
yes, we can detect if we look at it.
Hmm.
And those are some of the giveaways that you can tell if something's a deep fake or not. I mean, there's many other things. There's many other AI that start looking at frequency information to figure out if that's a deep fake or not. But the eye blinking, the eye movement is something that we can also visually say, oh, there's something not exactly right here. So the
Yeah,
consistency, basically, the temporal consistency is not there. You'll see something change. You'll see some facial features maybe appear, disappear, those kind of things.
yeah, Morris, that's a great segue, I think. So,
Yeah.
talking a little bit about the eyes, another technology that's at the forefront in this, realm is the notion of iris capture technology. You know, how does that compare in your opinion? It sounds like it's fairly favorable, but relative to other biometric systems in terms of things like resistance to spoofing, fraud, things like that. It sounds like, you're on the side of this is pretty favorable technology. Why don't you tell us a little bit about
Oh yeah, I love Iris, and we have a long history of Iris.
that?
So Iris is basically, you know, uh, Iris is the sphincter muscle between the pupil and the sclera, the white part of your eye, and it's the muscle that controls the pupil to dilate or contract. And that muscle, that the iris pattern, is actually unique to every individual. More importantly, it's thought not to change over a person's lifetime, just like a fingerprint. So face ages, we change appearance, we gain, we lose weight, we put makeup, we do this. Facial appearance can change a lot. Grow a beard. Iris is very stable in that respect, and it's something you're less likely to mess with surgically anyway, right?
Right.
Now you can put lenses, right? You can put those Halloween lenses to cover up your eye, but then that's the equivalent of me putting a bag over my face and say, "Who am I?" In the same way, all right, so you can detect if somebody is wearing is putting a pattern over your iris because your pupil is even now as I'm talking to you, my pupil is dilating and contracting naturally. It's changing, and the iris pattern is also equivalently. In fact, in the way the iris pattern actually moves is it's in a circularly way. So if you ever seen those old series Stargate SG-1, you know how the iris there opens up a portal. It's kind of like that way your iris sort of rotates and opens up and closes. And so you can look at those movements and see, well, is this somebody putting a fake lens and a fake iris? because it's not going to move that way naturally. So it's a lot harder to spoof. It's less to change. So, if you literally, even from a baby, you can do iris recognition. So, yeah, I love iris in that respect. Now, the challenge with iris is it's hard to capture. And I apologize. I think my dog's snoring. Benji, wake up.
No worries.
He always does
We
this
love
in all
dogs.
my
We
all
love
my
dogs on
Zoom
this
calls.
show. So. Yeah.
He always does this on all my Zoom calls. And I said, guys, I apologize. It's not me. I'm not snoring. This is my dog. He's a snorer.
And we're not
Hold on.
either. This is super interesting. So it's all
Benji,
good.
wake up.
Benji's like, I've heard this before, Mario. You just
Yes.
keep going.
And then he knows at the end when he knows exactly when I'm ending. He's just like wakes up. Okay, Dad, should we go outside? I need to do my business. Sorry about that.
So
Okay,
cool.
so where was I? Irises. So the challenge with irises is how do you capture an iris that in the old days you had this picture of like you're putting an eye somewhere like in this hole and like you felt like it was very, very intrusive, right? It's almost like think of Minority Report, very intrusive.
Right.
Although the beginning part of Minority Report, when Tom Cruise walks into the gap and he's recognized about a couple of meters away, that's pretty cool, right? Well, most iris systems are anywhere between maybe 10, 30 centimeters, maybe some up to a meter, somewhere there. We've actually built a system now 13 years ago. Back in 2009 we started, we finished 2011. We built the world's first system to capture an iris 13 meters away, 40 feet.
Wow.
I saw that video. It was kind of a long
saw-
range, right?
Yes.
Iris recognition.
Wow.
We built the world's first longest range iris system back in 2010. And it wasn't X marks the spot. It was anywhere between 6 meters to 13 meters. And I could enroll someone. It wasn't just matching. I could actually enroll someone. So iris to me is very fascinating in that respect. I think it's one of the most robust biometrics that you can't fool. You're less likely, someone is less likely to go mess with. And again, it's thought to be safe. The challenge with it is exactly that, capturing it in a long range way. And when people say, "Oh, iris recognition, long range, 30 meters," oh, that sounds scary. That sounds intrusive. And I say, no, it's iris recognition, face recognition. The way I look at all of this is, it's human-robot interaction. I have a computer system that is recognizing who it's interacting with. It needs to know, right? Is it Marius it's talking to? Is it Rachel? Is it Vince? Who is it interacting with? So it knows how to answer, right? If I step in the scene, it will continue a different conversation, right? Well, that's how facial recognition came into play. It wasn't Big Brother or any of these things. It was humans, computer systems need to know who they're interacting with.
Right.
And so all we've done is make systems better at understanding who you're talking to by looking at their face or iris. And if you can do that in a way that's not intrusive, because imagine if you have to go and place your eye or do something that in any way goes out of your way it's an explicit step, then it becomes intrusive. Then I feel that I'm getting my biometric captured, right? If I don't have to do anything, then I don't feel anything happen. I don't feel it's an extra step. And that's why fingerprints always have the biggest bad rep, because you're like going and you're putting your thumb or your finger on something, and it just feels very abnormal. It feels extremely intrusive, right? Now they've gotten better. There are touchless systems now where you can just swipe through and it will capture your fingerprints. And that's what I love about AI, the ability of building computer vision systems that can do that fast, less intrusive. In my mind, remove some of the negative stigma that Hollywood has tainted and really, really stained in us. That it's, I'm trying to remove I really feel like one of those painters. I'm trying to remove the stain from people. Okay, biometrics is not bad. Okay, it's not the root of all evil. Anything can be used for good or bad, but there's actually a lot of good. And we want systems to understand who they're talking to. We want a robot to know who to interact with. It's just more natural.
Definitely. And I hate to do this, but we are at the end of today's podcast. We're going to pick back up for part 2 next week. To all of our listeners out there, thank you so much for joining this week. And for our new listeners, welcome. And if you're enjoying the conversation, please subscribe. We're on all major podcast platforms. Until next week, everyone, stay secure. Thanks for joining us on the To The Point Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Forcepoint. For more information and show notes from today's episode, please visit www.forcepoint.com/podcast. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Google Podcasts.